The hall was filled with people, their voices low but sharp, whispers turning into laughter that carried a sting. Narendra Modi stood at the center of the room, his shoulders heavy, his eyes steady but burning deep inside. It was a gathering, meant to discuss progress, yet it had turned into a stage for humiliation. One man, dressed in arrogance, raised his voice and questioned Modi's worth. Others smirked, nodding along as if the insult gave them power. For a moment, the world around, Modi seemed to blur. The laughter echoed like thunder in his ears. He felt the weight of eyes pressing on him, some filled with judgment, some with pity. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his throat tightened. He remembered the long road he had walked, the struggles that had shaped him, and the countless times people had doubted him. Still, this moment felt different. It was public, it was sharp, and it cut him deeply. Inside his heart, the pain wrestled with silence. He thought of his childhood, the days when he had nothing but a dream. He thought of selling tea at the railway station, watching trains pass by, filled with people who seemed to have more than he ever could. Those memories were like old scars, reminders of how far he had come, but also of how fragile respect could feel when others tried to tear it down. Suddenly, in that silence, he heard a voice in his mind. It was not the voice of the man insulting him. It was the calm, steady voice of his father. Modi could almost see him again, sitting quietly at the small tea stall, his hands rough from work, his eyes gentle with wisdom. His father's words echoed, words he had spoken long ago when Modi was just a boy who struggled to carry water in heavy buckets. "Strength is not shown in anger, my son," his father had said softly. "Strength is shown when you are calm in front of insult, and when you rise above the laughter of those who do not understand your journey." The memory struck him like a beam of light. He realized that humiliation is temporary, but dignity is lasting. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and let silence speak louder than the man's cruel words. The room grew quieter as people noticed his composure. His calmness was not weakness. It was strength. The same strength his father had lived by. Across the hall, Sundar Pichai watched quietly. He saw the moment others missed. While the crowd laughed, Sundar noticed the fire in Modi's eyes and the patience in his silence. Sundar felt a wave of respect rise in his heart. He knew what it meant to carry the burden of humble beginnings, to face doubts, to be questioned, for things beyond control. In Modi's calmness, Sundar saw a reflection of his own battles. The laughter in the hall slowly died. The arrogant man shifted uneasily, realizing his words had not broken Modi. Instead, they had revealed his own smallness. People looked at Modi again, but now with different eyes. Some saw his strength, some felt ashamed of their laughter, and some quietly admired the way he had turned humiliation into dignity. The moment became heavy with silence. It was not the silence of defeat, but the silence of power. Sundar felt it deeply. He thought to himself that respect is not always demanded by loud words. Sometimes it is earned in quiet strength. And in that moment, as Modi stood still and calm, the seed of respect in Sundar's heart grew stronger. He felt he was not only witnessing a man defending his dignity, but also a lesson that would stay with him forever. The hall slowly emptied, but the weight of what happened lingered in Modi's mind. Though he had stayed calm on the outside, inside he carried a storm. Humiliation has a way of returning again and again in memory, each time sharper than before. He walked out into the cool evening air, the noise of the city wrapping around him like a heavy cloak. He could still hear the laughter in his ears, still feel the sting of every mocking glance. He sat on a bench under a dim streetlight. For a moment, he let his head drop into his hands. He asked himself if his journey would always be tested like this. Had all his struggles, his sleepless nights, his endless hard work been for nothing more than public insult? But then, like a small flame in darkness, the memory of his father's words returned again. He remembered one particular evening when he was young. His father had returned home late, exhausted after a long day at the tea stall. Modi had been angry because some boys in the town had mocked him for being poor. He had asked his father, "Why do people laugh at us? Why do they look down on us?" His father had smiled gently, even though his face was lined with hardship. He had said, "They laugh because they see only the surface, my son. They cannot see the roots, and roots, even though hidden, are what hold the tree strong." These words now echoed in Modi's heart, calming his storm. He realized he was no longer that boy who had to swallow insults in silence. He had grown, he had learned, and now he could carry those lessons into the world. As he rose from the bench, Sundar Pichai approached quietly. Sundar had not left the hall immediately. He had followed at a distance, watching Modi because something about the moment inside had touched him deeply. Sundar knew what it meant to be doubted. He had once been just a boy from a small town in India, carrying dreams that many thought were too big for him. He remembered professors telling him that others were smarter, that he might not fit in when he first reached America. He remembered the sting of being overlooked, the doubt of being underestimated. Sundar spoke softly. "Sir, I want you to know. I saw what happened in there, and I saw the way you handled it. It was not weakness. It was strength. It was something I will remember." Modi looked at Sundar, his eyes tired but steady. "It is not easy," he said. "Sometimes silence feels heavier than words, but silence can protect dignity when anger cannot." Sundar nodded, feeling a deep connection in that moment. He admired Modi's calmness, but more than that, he felt gratitude for seeing an example of how a person could carry respect even in the face of humiliation. As they spoke, a group of young students who had also witnessed the incident approached carefully. They had been quiet in the hall, too afraid to speak, but now they wanted to share their feelings. One of them said, "Sir, when they laughed, we felt ashamed. We should have spoken, but we were scared. Still, your silence taught us more than any speech could." Their words touched Modi's heart. He realized that even in moments of pain, there was a chance to inspire others. Humiliation could turn into a lesson, not only for himself, but for those watching. The night passed slowly, but by the time Modi returned home, his spirit had changed. He was still hurt, but he was no longer broken. He understood that humiliation is not the end. It is a test. It asks a person if they will let it destroy them or if they will turn it into strength. That night, Sundar sat alone in his room, replaying the scene in his mind. He thought of his own father, who had worked hard to give him education, who had lived with humility and patience. Sundar realized that respect is not just about achievements or titles. It is about how one holds themselves when the world tries to bring them down. And because of what he saw in Modi, Sundar felt his respect deepen, not just for Modi, but for the values both of their fathers had passed down. The seed of respect was now a growing tree. And Sundar knew this was only the beginning of a story that would teach him lessons for life. The next morning, Modi woke early, as he always did. The memory of the previous day still pressed heavily on his heart. But he knew life did not stop for pain. He stepped outside into the quiet streets, where the first light of dawn painted the sky. The world was waking slowly, but inside him the storm had not fully calmed. He thought again of his father's words about roots holding the tree strong, and he reminded himself that his journey was bigger than one moment of insult. He walked through the market, and as he did, he noticed familiar faces. Some people greeted him warmly, some looked away awkwardly, remembering the scene from the hall. Humiliation can spread quickly in whispers, but so can respect. While a few still smiled with mockery, others lowered their eyes with quiet admiration, unable to ignore the way he had carried himself. Later in the day, Modi visited a small school. He had promised the children he would come and speak to them about dreams and hard work. When he entered the classroom, their faces lit up. Children do not see power or weakness in the same way adults do. They see presence. They see heart. As Modi sat with them, he felt a wave of peace wash over him. One boy asked him a question with innocent eyes. "Sir, when people laugh at us, what should we do?" The boy's voice cracked with the same pain Modi had felt as a child. In that moment, Modi saw himself in that boy. He answered softly, "When they laugh, remember this. They see only today. They do not see tomorrow. If you work hard, if you stay humble, one day their laughter will become silence, and their silence will turn into respect." The room was quiet. The children listened with wide eyes, and a seed of resilience was planted in their hearts. Modi realized that his own humiliation had given him the words to heal others. Far away, Sundar Pichai was reflecting on his own path. He was preparing for an important meeting with global leaders, but the image of Modi's silence still followed him. He remembered his own humiliations, like the time in college when he had spoken with a strong accent and some students laughed at him. He had felt small, just as Modi must have felt yesterday. Yet over the years, Sundar had learned to turn such moments into fuel. Seeing Modi do the same gave him a sense of kinship, a bond built not through words, but through shared experience. Later, that evening, Sundar reached out to Modi. He wanted to meet again, not as a formal leader to another, but as a human being who had been touched by strength. When they met, Sundar said, "Yesterday you taught me something. I have faced many humiliations in my journey, but I realized I never truly thought of them as lessons. You made me see that silence can carry power." Modi looked at him with quiet eyes and replied, "It was not my strength alone. It was my Father's voice in my heart. Sometimes the voices of those who raised us are what keep us standing." Sundar nodded. He thought of his own father again, a man who had worked tirelessly to provide for his education. Sundar's respect for Modi deepened, not just because of what he had witnessed, but because Modi's story connected to his own roots. At that moment, a thought formed in Sundar's mind. Respect is not only about what we achieve in the present, but also about honoring the sacrifices of those who came before us. As the night grew darker, the two men sat together in quiet conversation. They spoke about fathers, about struggles, about the weight of expectation. The world saw them as leaders, as public figures, but in that moment they were simply sons remembering the lessons of their parents. They did not know it yet, but this shared understanding would soon lead them into an even greater test, where their strength and humility would be needed more than ever. Days passed, but the memory of that night stayed with both Modi and Sundar. Their bond had grown stronger, and though they came from different paths, there was now a deep respect flowing quietly between them. But life, as always, does not allow peace to last long. A new test was waiting, one that would force both men to look deeper into themselves and their values. A large conference was announced where leaders, innovators, and thinkers from around the world were invited. The purpose was to discuss the future of technology and humanity, but beneath the surface it was also a stage where egos clashed and pride often overshadowed wisdom. Modi and Sundar were both invited to speak. The room would be filled with powerful voices, some friendly, some critical, and many eager to prove themselves superior. On the day of the conference, the hall was grand, filled with lights, cameras, and the quiet buzz of thousands of people waiting to hear words that could shape the future. Modi entered with calm steps, remembering the humiliation he had faced days earlier. He knew eyes would still watch him with judgment, some still carrying the memory of his silence. Sundar entered soon after, carrying both nervousness and determination. Though he had become one of the most respected leaders in technology, he still carried the memory of being underestimated. As the event began, one after another, speakers walked onto the stage. Some spoke with confidence, some with arrogance, and some with fear hidden behind loud words. The audience clapped, cheered, and at times whispered. When Modi's name was announced, the hall grew tense. Some wondered if he would defend himself for what had happened before, or if he would remain silent again. Modi stepped to the podium. His eyes scanned the crowd, not with anger, but with quiet steadiness. He began, "When I was a boy, I sold tea at a railway station. People laughed at me then, as some laugh at me now. But what I learned is that laughter fades, and what remains is character. A man is not measured by how he speaks in times of comfort, but how he stands in times of humiliation." The hall grew silent. His words carried no bitterness, only truth. Many who had mocked him earlier felt a sting in their hearts. They had expected anger, but instead they received wisdom. When Sundar's turn came, he walked to the stage with a heart full of thoughts. He looked at Modi sitting in the front row, and he felt the weight of responsibility. He began, "When I first left India for America, I carried little more than hope. I struggled to speak, I struggled to fit in, and yes, I too was laughed at. But I learned that humility is not weakness, it is strength. Today, I lead one of the largest technology companies, not because I silenced those who laughed, but because I listened to the lessons of those who believed in me." His words touched the audience. Many young people in the crowd felt their own struggles reflected in Sundar's voice. They realized that greatness often rises not from privilege, but from pain. But just as the room was filled with inspiration, a man stood up from the back. He was a critic known for his harsh words. His voice was sharp as he interrupted, "Both of you speak of struggle, but what about results? Silence does not build nations. Humility does not build technology. Isn't it power and dominance that truly matter?" The hall grew tense. People turned to see how Modi and Sundar would respond. It was another test, another chance for humiliation to enter. But this time, neither man stood alone. Modi looked at Sundar, and Sundar looked back at him. They both carried the voices of their fathers in their hearts. Together they answered, not with anger but with calm strength. Modi said, "Power without humility destroys itself." Sundar followed, "And technology without respect loses its meaning." The critic fell silent. The hall erupted into applause. What could have been another moment of humiliation became a moment of unity and wisdom. In that instant, the bond between Modi and Sundar grew even stronger. They had faced the test together, and their shared humility had turned into shared strength. After the conference, the applause still echoed in their ears, but so did the weight of responsibility. Modi and Sundar had not only defended themselves with dignity, they had also inspired many. Yet inspiration comes with a price. For the more people admire you, the more others look for ways to pull you down. In the days that followed, newspapers and television channels carried stories of their words. Some praised their humility, saying it was a lesson the world needed, but others twisted their silence and respect into weakness. Headlines appeared questioning their strength. Commentators mocked their calmness, and critics whispered that they were unfit to lead in a world where only power seemed to matter. Modi felt the sting again. He had faced humiliation before, but now it returned in a new shape, not from one man in a hall, but from voices spread across the nation. Every insult carried the same weight. Every mockery tried to remind him of his past. He sat alone at night, wondering if people would ever truly understand the meaning of dignity. Sundar, too, faced his own storm. Business rivals laughed at his words about respect, saying kindness had no place in the fast world of technology. They argued that only aggression and profit mattered. Sundar felt a heaviness inside. He had built his life on calmness, on patience, on respect for those around him, but now those very values were being attacked as weakness. One evening, the two met again in a quiet garden away from the noise of cameras and reporters. They sat under a tree, the air cool, the silence comforting. Modi spoke first, his voice low but steady. "It feels like no matter what we do, there will always be those who call humility weakness." Sundar nodded slowly. "I know. But I also know that what we saw in that hall, when the crowd grew silent, was real. People listened because they felt the truth in our words. Critics may be loud, but truth is patient. It grows quietly." Modi closed his eyes and remembered his father again. He heard his words as if whispered through time. "My son, when the river is calm, people throw stones into it to see if it will ripple. But the river does not fight the stones. It carries them away, and it keeps flowing." He opened his eyes and said to Sundar, "We must be the river. Let them throw stones. We will keep flowing." Sundar felt his chest lighten. Those words gave him strength, the same way they had given Modi strength as a boy. He realized that leadership is not about silencing critics, but about standing firm in the values that matter. Soon after, a group of young entrepreneurs requested to meet them both. They had heard their speeches and wanted guidance. When the meeting took place, one of the young men said, "Sir, people laugh at us too. They say our dreams are too big. But when we heard you, we felt hope. We want to know how you keep moving when the world tries to stop you." Modi smiled gently and said, "You move forward because stopping would only give power to those who laugh. You move forward because every step you take is not just for you, but for those who come after you." Sundar added, "And you remember that respect is not won in a single day. It is built over years, through patience, through humility, through staying true to your values even when others cannot see their worth." The young entrepreneurs listened with tears in their eyes. They felt something shift inside them. They realized that humiliation is not the end of a dream, but often the beginning of strength. As the meeting ended, Sundar looked at Modi with quiet respect. He realized that the bond they shared was not just about personal pain, but about guiding others who carried the same burdens. The world might continue to throw stones, but together, Modi and Sundar were becoming a river that carried hope. The days grew heavier as challenges rose again. Critics did not rest, and whispers of doubt grew louder. In every corner, people debated if humility and respect could survive in a world that seemed to worship only power. Some mocked Modi for being calm when insulted. Others mocked Sundar for speaking of kindness in business. But amid all the noise, something else was quietly growing. Respect was spreading among ordinary people, those who saw themselves in their struggles. One evening, Modi traveled back to the railway station where he once sold tea as a boy. The platform looked different now, but the air still carried the same scent of trains, coal, and dust. He walked slowly, his mind filled with memories of humiliation from his childhood. Yet instead of bitterness, he felt peace. He saw children running, vendors calling out, and he thought to himself, "This is where my strength was born. This is where my father's words first carried me." As he stood there, an old man approached him. The man's face was wrinkled, his clothes simple, but his eyes were sharp. He said softly, "I remember you, boy. I remember when you sold tea here. People laughed at you, but you never stopped. Today, I see you again, not as that boy, but as a man who carried himself with dignity. I want you to know, we saw your struggle, even if we never said it." Those words touched Modi deeply. He realized that even when people seem silent, they notice. Even when respect is not spoken, it can still be felt. Meanwhile, Sundar visited his childhood home in Tamil Nadu. Walking through the narrow lanes, he remembered carrying his school bag under the hot sun, dreaming of a world beyond. He remembered nights when electricity would go out and he would study by candlelight. He remembered his father's gentle voice telling him, "Education is the bridge, my son. Cross it with patience, and it will take you far." Standing there, Sundar felt tears in his eyes. He whispered to himself, "Father, your bridge brought me here, but your humility kept me standing." He realized that his journey was never about proving critics wrong, but about proving his father right. When Modi and Sundar met again, they shared their visits with each other. Both had gone back to their roots, and both had found strength in their memories. Modi said, "Our fathers gave us strength without knowing the world we would face. Yet their words prepared us for moments like these." Sundar nodded and replied, "And maybe now it is our turn to pass those words to others." Soon after, a large gathering was arranged, this time not with leaders and critics, but with ordinary people, workers, students, farmers, and small entrepreneurs. Modi and Sundar stood before them, not as men defending themselves, but as voices, sharing lessons. Modi spoke of silence that carries dignity. Sundar spoke of humility that carries respect. As they spoke, the crowd listened with full hearts. Tears fell. Smiles spread. And in that moment, the people saw not two powerful men, but two sons who had turned humiliation into wisdom. The audience stood, applauding not with noise alone, but with respect that could be felt like a rising wave. For the first time in many days, Modi felt his heart lighten. Sundar, too, felt a peace he had not known for years. They realized that humiliation can echo, but so can respect. And respect, once planted, grows stronger than any insult. But they also knew this was not the end. Life would test them again, and the final test was yet to come. A test that would decide if their silence and humility could truly change the hearts of even their harshest critics. The air was heavy with tension. The final test came not in silence, not in whispers, but in front of the world once more. A global summit was organized where leaders and visionaries gathered to decide on future partnerships. Modi and Sundar were invited, but their presence was already under attack. Many critics had united their voices, saying that men who carried humility and silence were unfit to guide the next era. When they entered the hall, the atmosphere was sharp. People whispered, some clapped politely, others smirked openly. Modi could feel the same sting from before, the same cold laughter that had tried to humiliate him. Sundar, too, felt the eyes of rivals, measuring him with doubt. The stage was set for another attempt to break their dignity. A powerful speaker stood before them, his voice filled with pride. He pointed at Modi and Sundar and declared, "Words of respect and humility are beautiful, but the world is built on strength. Nations rise with power, companies grow with dominance. Silence and kindness are illusions. Tell us, what have your values truly given you?" The hall fell silent. Eyes turned toward them, waiting to see if they would fall again under the weight of insult. But Modi stood tall, his father's voice echoing in his heart. He spoke with calmness. "My values gave me the strength to rise when people laughed at me as a boy selling tea. They gave me the dignity to stand here today not as a man of power, but as a man of roots. Power may build walls, but respect builds bridges. And the world needs bridges more than walls." His words cut through the hall like truth that could not be denied. People who had laughed felt their hearts stir. Some lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Then Sundar spoke, his voice steady but emotional. "My values gave me the courage to leave a small town with nothing but hope. They gave me patience when people laughed at my accent, when professors doubted me, when rivals tried to break me. Today, I lead not through fear, but through respect. I learned that technology without humility is empty and leadership without kindness is blind." The audience was still, the silence heavy but powerful. The critic who had challenged them shifted uneasily. He wanted to speak again, but the wave of quiet respect in the hall drowned his voice before he could try. Then something unexpected happened. A young man from the audience stood up. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. "Sir," he said, looking at Modi, "yesterday I was laughed at in my workplace for coming from a poor family. I wanted to give up, but when I hear you today, I know I must not stop." He turned to Sundar. "And when I hear you, I know I must hold my head high, even if others doubt me." Others began to stand, one by one. A woman spoke of being mocked for her dreams. A student spoke of being laughed at for his accent. A worker spoke of being shamed for his simple clothes. Each of them found strength in the words spoken by Modi and Sundar. The hall, once filled with arrogance and pride, was now filled with tears, respect, and hope. Applause rose, not the kind that fades quickly, but the kind that grows louder and stronger, born from hearts truly touched. Modi and Sundar looked at each other. In their eyes was the understanding that humiliation had been their greatest test, but it had also been their greatest gift. It had shaped them, humbled them, and prepared them to inspire others. The critic who had challenged them stood silently now, his face pale. He realized that power may control minds, but respect touches souls. As the summit ended, people left with a new thought in their hearts. That dignity in the face of humiliation is a strength greater than any weapon, and humility in the face of pride is a wisdom deeper than any victory. That night, Modi walked under the stars and thought of his father's words once more. He whispered to himself, "You were right, Father. Silence can be stronger than anger." Sundar sat quietly in his room, remembering his father's voice, and whispered, "You were right, Father. Patience can carry a man farther than power." Together, though on different paths, they had proven that humility and respect are not weakness. They are the greatest strength a person can carry.